Hey, what's up? It's Menta, and this is what we're going to be making today. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and that's a Pluck filter tutorial, as you probably recognize from the little clip in the intro. You've definitely heard tracks that use this. Technical used it quite a lot, among others. And it took me a very long time to figure out exactly how to make it sound exactly how I wanted it to. So now I figured that out, I wanted to share with you just how I achieved it. So I've got a melody here with a stack that I made using presets from my preset bank. And that sounds like this. Now what we want to do is make it so that when we filter this down during a build up or even an intro to the lead, you want it to go down in a way that you let a little bit of the sound come through, like a pluck, but still filter down afterwards. I don't really know the proper name for it. I call it a pluck filter. But the first thing to do is to get a MIDI out, chuck it on port 1, and you have to kind of replicate this melody, excluding the portamento notes. That's important. So anytime there's a portamento note, you probably want to stretch this out because this MIDI is going to be used to trigger the envelope on this filter. It's an envelope follower. This is the first note, obviously, when you hear it. You want that first note to pluck, the second note to pluck, but because this porter like slides up, you probably don't want this last note here to pluck. And this is a bit of a trial and error. You might want it to. You might have to see how it sounds and then decide. We'll leave it for now and we'll do that. But we might come back and tweak that. We'll have to see how it sounds. And you fill this out for the entire melody. Now, once you've got that all matched up to the melody, it doesn't actually matter what note this plays on. It's literally just a signal to send to tell the envelope to send. So we just want to basically put an input here whenever we want to trigger the envelope filter. Now, next thing we do once we've got that is we want to come to our channel that you want to put the filter on. In my case, I put it on the pre-processing lead bus. So before delay and before reverb, I feel like this gives it a little bit more of a professional sound because the reverb and delay are bouncing or playing off of the filter. So as the cutoff goes down, the reverb's reacting to the cutoff rather than if you did it after and then you've got the filter like filtering the reverb and delay as well, which doesn't really sound that nice. We're going to use tal-filter 2, which is a freebie. You can grab it. I'll probably put a link in the description or something to grab this if you don't have it already. And this is what I found does the job that doesn't cost anything, which is handy. So what we're going to do immediately is we're currently on loop mode, and you can kind of see that this envelope is just playing on a loop. At the moment, it's about 2 bars, I think. We want it to be set to MIDI and not looping. And we want to go into the settings here and set the MIDI input port to 1 because that is what we mapped our MIDI out to, port 1. So port 1 input. And that means that this will now send events to this plugin. What we want to do now is draw out our pluck. And we know how a pluck looks, right? So you want a sharp decay on an initial very quick attack. Something somewhat like that. We want to set this to low pass mode so that we're actually doing a low pass filter on this envelope rather than panning or volume. or high pass or band pass, which the options as well. And then what we want to do is lower down the depth. You can see there's a depth knob here and a cutoff, and they work harmoniously. So the depth basically gives you a window of how much you want the envelope to open the filter, this low pass filter. The higher you have this depth, the more, well, the higher the cutoff is essentially. If you have a lower depth, you get a much smaller one. I can show you this in action. Is if I've done this correctly and this is now linked up, when we press play, we should get some sort of a plucky filter sound. You can hear that's not really plucking enough. Now, to get around that, you just pop up the input gain slightly. So we're basically pushing more volume into this. And then you will need to adjust your output volume as you need to, you know. And that should hopefully improve the sound of the pluck. And you can also do things like the resonance increase and things. And what I wanted to show you as well, so you can get a little bit of a comparison, is if I put it after the delay and reverb, you're probably actually going to get a more emphasized filter, which to be honest might be what you want. Let me copy these settings over, and we've still got the input port set up nice. I also think we want to lower this as well. You can hear what I mean. You're not getting any, it's very, very, very dry if we do it that way. Whereas if we put it over here and also lower this down, because I forgot to do that. You get a pluck filter, and I've used this quite a lot in various songs, and it's really handy for just doing that little bit extra. And what you can do, just as a final point, is if we put it in here, you can go into here and you can tweak the cutoff and the depth as automation, and you can give yourself quite an interesting dynamic between the two. So we do this, so we have it filtered. And we go in here, and we maybe move this along so we can make it more of an abrupt one. And if we mute the depth for a minute, let's have a look at what we want it to set at. That's probably quite nice. So back in here, what we can do is we want it about Was it 7 depth? Yeah, so we have the depth at about 70%. And the filter we can bring right down. And what you can do is you can play with the depth. So you can have little bits in here that sort of jump up and then come back down. Make it quite exaggerated if you want. And you can lower the depth afterwards as well. And then you can do the same with the filter, where if you drop the depth down, I hope you can see how this is perhaps quite a useful little tool. And the one I prepared earlier, which is the one I've actually been using, is this variant of it, which I've made in the past and used in some songs, which sounds like this. And the only real difference is that I've got some resonance up. But they're virtually very similar. You can play with the envelope yourself and see which one you prefer. And if you don't want to go setting all this up yourself, I am going to chuck this preset in the description down below so you can go and grab it. And it's already set up for you. Obviously, you know, you can just automate the depth and automate the cutoff windows as you see fit. There are cases, before I finish up, where you shouldn't have this problem in a big long effects bus if you do this where I put it before everything goes on, as long as your individual channels for your lead stacks aren't that complicated. But I believe this is a problem in most DAWs. But because MIDI out is triggering as MIDI at the time this is going through, it completely bypasses any plugin delay compensation that there might be. So luckily all of this track latency you can see is not being added because it's, you know, there's just a EQ on each of them. So there's not enough going on to up the compensation for track latency through lots of heavy effects. So putting this here, you shouldn't have a problem using MIDI. However, if you put it over here or over here and you've got particularly intensive compression chains and reverb, and you can see like that adds 2 milliseconds of delay, that adds 0.7 milliseconds of delay, that adds 0.3 milliseconds of delay. You can see that in the hint window in FL. If you have a lot going on, you get up to, you know, several milliseconds, so, you know, sort of like 5 or 6 milliseconds, or even beyond that, 10 milliseconds, you're going to have this hitting the trigger on that Pluck filter, if you've got it right at the end, on a 10 millisecond delay, because this has no idea about PDC. In that case, if you want to do it that way, absolutely fine. It's a bit more painful, but you can, instead of setting this to MIDI, set this to trigger. And you can see this trigger button triggers the little envelope with the blue line. So what you can do is you can take that trigger in here, you can see it's trigger, and you can do it in automation. So every time you want it to trigger, you basically have to do this. So I want it to trigger there. I then want it to trigger here. and so on and so forth. And that will, if we swap it over to trigger mode or not on MIDI, you can see the first two triggered. You obviously only have to do this once for your melody. I just find it a bit more painstaking than doing a MIDI out, but both options work. Just wanted to add that in at the end there, in case you were unaware of the way these sort of envelope followers interact with PDC. So that is that. I appreciate this isn't a long tutorial, but I wanted to keep this quite concise and to the point. The preset will be down below. My preset bank is out if you want to grab it, if you like the sounds. And yeah, I'm going to try my best to get some more tutorials out along the way. So thanks for tuning in. And until next time, I'll see you later.